Okay, once again, I'll start with an apology. I did not get to do an Impact video on Thursday night, given the fact that we were in Getaway. But we got a lot of awesome things to rant about, so you can check that video out also on the Pop playlist if you want to. So I do have a cryptic comment, and I actually revealed that in the video from 2 days ago. And that would be bars. My cryptic comment is bars because both of these movies take place in a prison. This is the battle of all battles that's probably going to divide you with most people on the internet. It's the Shawshank Redemption versus Midnight Express. So, AJ, take it away.
Well, the question most people are probably asking is, why is Shawshank not up against the Green Mile?
That is a good question. Why?
Because they're both prison movies based off Stephen King stories.
Yeah, why did you not put it against the Green Mile?
Because the Green Mile's main focus is a prison guard.
True.
And we go into his outside life, plus the prison and all that, and it's a whole thing. Whereas these movies actually follow the prisoners.
Okay.
That's it.
Fair enough.
Yes.
There's always a reason for everything, folks.
And there's a few, there's a lot of similarities, but mainly both movies, have an evil warden character. They're both nominated for Best Picture in their respective years. Midnight Express actually won 2 Oscars. Shawshank was nominated for 7, but didn't win any.
Oh, wow.
And got snubbed in director. Alan Parker got in for Midnight Express, but Frank Darabont was snubbed for Shawshank. Frank Darabont, by the way, is also the guy that did The Green Mile. So there's that too.
This is like telling me that should be right next to it, not Midnight Express.
I promise you, Midnight Express goes much better with Shawshank than The Green Mile would.
Put the Green Mile up against something somewhere down the road, maybe.
So, yeah, the big difference is that it feels weird saying this because one of the things about Shawshank is how horrible Shawshank Prison is.
Yeah.
And how, the guards will, beat you to death, literally, and they'll, it's got a dark atmosphere around it.
Okay.
But it also has a lot of light moments, too.
Mm-hmm.
Despite how notoriously brutal the Shawshank Prison is, Shawshank kind of looks like fancy living after you watch Midnight Express.
Wow.
Because it's a prison in Turkey. And apparently, Turkey was not very pleased with this movie because of how it portrayed them as extremely and incredibly barbaric.
Okay.
And Billy Hayes, the guy that is the main character, the real guy that wrote the book that this is based on, actually said, even though what he went through was horrible, the movie greatly exaggerated it. But regardless, we're judging it as a movie and not as a thing. Because this is a Stephen King story. This is totally fake. Midnight Express is real, but exaggerated.
Okay.
So, it's... I don't know specifically how exaggerated it is, what's real and what isn't. But we'll probably get there throughout this video. I'm going to start with our main characters. The people that we see getting imprisoned and we follow throughout the movie.
Okay.
That is Andy Dufresne and Billy Hayes, played by Tim Robbins and Brad Davis. Brad Davis is only popular for 2 movies, this and Chariots of Fire. He actually died pretty young, unfortunately, so these are pretty much his claims to fame. And of course Tim Robbins is Tim Robbins.
Yeah.
I'll start with Andy. Andy's a very interesting and enigmatic character. The interesting thing is, he's in prison for shooting his wife and her lover. But the way the movie begins is we see this over the DA played by Jeffrey DeMond from The Walking Dead, I guess. He's in a lot of things, but we'll say The Walking Dead so people know what I'm talking about. He was Dale in the first 2 seasons. He is interrogating Andy, and we see what's going on. He's sitting in his car, and he's loading his gun. And then he stumbles out of his car, and the flashback stops there. And the DA is saying that he went into the house and shot his wife and her lover. And Andy says that he changed his mind and went off and threw his gun, in the river, and somebody else went in and shot them.
Okay.
But we don't know, because we didn't see the flashback play out. And the interesting thing that the movie does with Andy's character is, I don't know how you would describe Tim Robbins' appearance. He looks like he could go one way or the other. He looks like he could possibly be innocent, but he also looks like maybe he could be a murderer. This was another debate in Mystic River.
Very true.
Is Tim Robbins look like a murderer or not? The movie is actually really ambiguous about that throughout it. And even if it actually comes to a conclusion, but even then, it makes you wonder. Because the judge says, you just look like you have no remorse. You're getting 2 life sentences. The interesting thing is, he claims that he's innocent, and then Freeman says, everybody claims they're innocent in Shawshank, and that's a running thing. Pretty much everybody in Shawshank is guilty, but they're all claiming to be innocent. It's basically what they're saying.
Okay.
But we get the idea that we don't know really if Red believes him or not. Probably not. But then, sure enough, there is a scene towards the middle where this new guy, Tommy, comes in. And he is asking about Andy, and Red says he killed his wife and her lover. And he, that's when we pretty much determine, well, if Red thinks Andy really did it, he probably really did it.
Okay.
But then Tommy says, actually, I was bunked up with a guy in another prison that confessed to me only to a murder exactly like the way Andy supposedly killed his wife and her lover. So then it's determined that Andy's actually innocent, and that guy is the one that killed him. But then he goes to the warden, and the warden tries to, you know, get this cleared up, and the warden basically tells him, you know, it's just him just telling stories, and it's just him getting into your head and stuff like that. Now, of course, the warden's a really bad guy, so he's probably just saying that so he doesn't have to do anything about it. But I suppose if you and the movie pretty much leaves it at that. But if you really, really want to think about it, there is always that possibility that maybe Andy has actually convinced himself that he is innocent, if he wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
And the warden may have been right about this just being some... Because what are the odds?
Yeah.
So, the movie, apart from that, the movie never tells us if Andy really did it or not. And I think that really adds to the enigmatic way of his character. Andy has that great scene in the library with Red where he's talking about, he's still claiming to be innocent, but then he's talking about basically all the crimes he's committing to help the warden get money, to basically stay on his good side. And he's saying, isn't it funny when on the outside I was innocent and straight arrow, it took me coming to prison to turn into a criminal. There's a lot of argument about Red being the main character. Morgan Freeman got a Best Leading Actor nomination for this, and Tim Robbins didn't. I think Red is really a supporting character, but the only time that can be argued is after Andy escapes. There's still like a half hour left. And once Andy escapes, we pretty much don't see him anymore till the end, except when he's going through the bank stuff. But he... Pretty much, once Andy's out of prison, Tim Robbins doesn't have any more lines for the rest of the movie. And we see Red finish his prison term and then go out into the world, and we pretty much follow him, which kind of gives you the idea he might be the leading character, especially since he narrates the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I've always seen it as Andy was the main character. I probably should have had this debate before I went through Andy's whole thing, but that argument is always there, but I would say Andy's the main character over Red. Because even if it's Red narrating, it's Andy that the story's following.
True.
It's Andy that Red is telling the story about. So, you know. There's also the co-lead argument, but fine. We'll go with that. But regardless, we're following Andy because he's the one that we see from the start of his prison term to the end of it. So, going on to Billy. This confused me for a long time. It's Billy Hayes, played by Brad Davis. Sometimes I'd get those confused. I think the character was Brad Davis and the actor was Billy Hayes.
They both could work.
The real Billy Hayes has been in movies, though. So that's funny. It's hard to get a grasp on Billy for the first part of the movie because his Deus's acting is a little bit wooden, and he's just kind of a normal character, basically. He doesn't really have too many big moments. But there's three things that made me want to sway this in his direction. There is the scene with him and his dad, when you can tell in the beginning, Billy's one of those guys that kind of plays it cool. Like, even when he gets caught with the drugs, when he's getting arrested, he's fairly calm. Despite, he was nervous the whole time, but once he's finally caught, he's actually surprisingly calm about the whole thing. And we think he's kind of one of those play-it-cool guys for a while, but then he has that moment where it's his delivery, too. The way he just kind of looks at his dad and really quietly just goes, "You gotta get me out of here." But then the warden comes and breaks that conversation up. The second scene is a very powerful scene where he's doing the normal prisoner thing where he's using chalk to count the days on the wall.
Yeah.
And he only has 53 days left. And then they call him into court because he's amped up because he's going home. He only has 53 days left, and they're calling him into court. It's going to be awesome. Well, apparently the Turkish police want to make an example out of him, and they have added a sentence of no less than 30 more years.
God.
So he has to go into court and give this huge speech that's a really big scene, and it's really well played, and it brings a lot more depth to his character. His character progressively builds from the blank canvas we assumed he was at the start. And then there's the scene with Rifki. The most famous scene of the movie. Rifki is a fellow prisoner that's basically a kiss-ass to the guards. And finally, Rifki gets John Hurt sent off to the other ward for, like, mental patients, basically. Just the psychotic prisoners. And this pushes Billy over the edge. And Billy goes on this fucking rampage. And basically tears the whole place apart and beats the shit out of Rifki. And the scene ends with him opening Rifki's mouth, reaching down, and biting Rifki's tongue out.
Oh, God.
And then he gets sent to the psychotic prisoners ward also.
Yeah.
I forget what they call it, like Section 13 or something like that. See, it's really interesting to watch his... Andy, you pretty much you're intrigued at the start, and he keeps you interested through the whole movie, whereas Billy starts off blank, but he's able to really build onto that, and the character progressively grows more and more into this unpredictable character. So, unfortunately, I have to start this segment off with one of the cop-outs.
Oh, no.
I don't think I can choose between Billy and Andy. That's right. I talked about these characters for about 10 minutes just to tell you I can't choose.
Oh, God. So, I don't even want to put two boxes above their heads right now.
I might as well have just done 5 categories, but I felt the need to mention how well-rounded these two characters are.
Okay.
So, and to show you how close this competition is. Because some people might say, I've barely heard of Midnight Express, and Shawshank's supposed to be one of the greatest movies of all time. This should be a no-brainer. Well, not really. So, there you go. Nobody has a point yet, and we're 15 minutes in almost. Don't worry, our next one is an interesting topic, and it will have I will actually choose one. The next one is the character of the warden.
Okay.
It's Warden Norton, played by Bob Gunton in Shawshank, and Paul L. Smith playing... They never say his name, but he has one.
Hamadow.
Yeah, if they said his name, I've never caught it in the movie itself.
It's actually listed as that, too.
So, and these guys are totally different, but they're both equally immoral and not good.
Okay.
We'll start with Warden Norton. He is a really complex character. At first I was thinking maybe he's a little inconsistent as a character, but I think it's just he has no idea what team he wants to play for.
Fair enough.
He insists every prisoner have the Bible and read it. You're basically going to get fucked up if you take the Lord's name in vain in his prison. And he's got a Bible verse on his wall in his office.
Okay.
However, he is not a good guy.
Fair enough.
He uses Andy to get money for him, basically. Illegally. There is the scene where he... I was talking earlier, where Tommy talked about the guy that potentially really killed Andy's wife.
Mm.
So this could really help Andy get out. And he kind of owes Andy, after all this money he's gotten him through these illegal tactics. So do you know what he does?
Mm.
He tells Tommy that he's going to meet him outside and they're going to talk about it. So Tommy goes outside and he meets the warden. And they talk it over and he says, you need to make sure that this is, on the down low and nobody really knows about this. And just play it cool. And Tommy's like, sure, okay. Then he orders Clancy Brown to shoot him dead. Right there. And then, here's the thing, was Tommy's whole story was Andy was teaching him. And he was going to, get a diploma or a degree or whatever it was. And he actually got Andy was put in the hole because he played Mozart really loud over the intercom. I think it was Mozart. And then the warden comes after he's learned the great news that Tommy passed and is gonna get his degree or diploma or whatever. Warden Norton comes down and tells him of the news that he unfortunately died. And then Andy's getting amped up and says, I'm not gonna help you with this anymore, and I'm not gonna help you get money anymore. And the warden says, well, okay, then that's another month in the hole, and he just leaves him there. And Andy spends 2 months straight in solitary confinement.
Wow.
And then, of course, we learn how cowardly he was overall because the ending, when he gets found out and everybody gets, ratted out, Red's narration says the warden was not going to go quietly. And we see the warden loading the gun. And the cops are coming, and they're on the other side of the door, and the warden has the loaded gun, and he's ready. And then just as the cops come in, he shoots himself instead.
Wow.
So, yeah, not a good dude.
No.
But you can never tell what side he's going to be on, because there was, after that time in the hole, after 2 months in the hole, after killing Tommy just to keep him in prison, he says, sincerely, he says, it's good to have you back, Andy. It wasn't the same without you. So you have no... It's hard to tell exactly what's... We don't... Maybe that was a work.
It's condescending.
But he seemed very sincere about it. So
yeah, maybe.
I don't know. You can see what I was talking about. With sometimes I wondered if it was an inconsistency in the character. But I think that's just the way he is. Sometimes he wants to be your best friend. Sometimes... he wants you to suffer as much as possible for no goddamn reason. Basically, he needed Andy to get him money.
Okay.
But that branched off into a lot of things that weren't good for most people involved. The warden in Midnight Express is not so complicated. He's very... Not to jump on this immediately. This is not... Compared to Norton, the warden in Midnight Express is very one-dimensional. He's one of those really big dudes that every single time we see him, he's profusely sweating.
Okay.
And he will just... You have the character that Clancy Brown plays, Captain Hadley, I think his name is. And Warden Norton basically has him do all the dirty work. The warden in Midnight Express does everything himself. He's the one that beats the prisoners. He's the one that... the prisoners actually befriend a cat, and I think and of course, something happens, and the next morning we see that cat hanging by its neck in the middle of the cell. I think we're supposed to assume the warden did that himself.
I officially hate this guy.
He's dead.
Good.
the way he died in real life and the way he dies in the movie were totally different. In the movie, he and Billy fight, and Billy pushes him into a coat rack, and his head gets impaled.
Nice.
In real life, apparently, a prisoner actually got out of prison. Like, they were released. And then, even though after they were released from prison, they went and found that warden in a cafe and shot him in public. Billy had to kill him for reasons of the plot, but I think that would have made a really effective scene if they put the real death in the movie.
I agree.
But regardless, it's always good to have those bad guy characters that always take matters into their own hands, which was very interesting to see. But regardless, like I said, one just really outweighs the other because as vicious and brutal as he is, there's really nothing to the Warden in Midnight Express. And Warden Norton has all these interesting, unpredictable things that he has going on. So that point would be Shawshank. The next is going to be a hefty list. This is the supporting characters.
Okay.
We'll start with Shawshank again. We'll start with Clancy Brown, who, I've said this before, I'll go ahead and mention it again, just because I think it's hilarious to say. Clancy Brown is known for two things. He's the villain in Highlander, and he's Mr. Krabs. And he's an awesome actor. He, coincidentally enough, or ironically enough even, he's in the movie Bad Boys with Sean Penn.
Mm-hmm.
That's about like a juvenile prison. And he's one of the prisoners.
Nice.
He's like the tough prisoner. And in this, he's basically the warden's like main muscle, basically. He's the one that, beats the prisoners and shoots them and degrades them and does whatever.
Like Jeremy Piven is in PCU, and then you see him in Old School, and he's the complete opposite of his character. Yeah.
Captain Hadley's a very interesting character. He's a lot like the warden, and he's going back and forth all the time.
Okay.
For the most part, he's a bad guy. Like, Clancy Brown actually said he got offers from prison guards to, like, hang out with them to kind of get a vibe of what it would be like.
Yep.
And he turned them all down because he said, my character's a really bad guy, and I don't want that to carry over into what they really do.
Yeah.
But the thing is they're on the roof working, and he overhears Hadley talking about possibly getting like an inheritance or something.
Mm.
But he's talking about basically with taxing and the government and all that, he's pretty much not going to get any of it, or not enough to be worth it. And of course, Andy's a banker, and Andy helps him figure out a way to get all of the money.
Nice.
And that basically gets him on Hadley's good side for a long time. But then he's just constantly going back and forth, and you don't know when he's trustworthy and when he isn't. And then to top it all off, he's this badass character through the whole movie. And we don't actually see it, but Red says in the narration, when Hadley gets arrested at the end, urban legend has it that he cried like a baby on his way to jail. Next, there is probably the most famous side character in the movie is Brooks. Goddamn Robot Chicken for making me not be able to take this scene seriously anymore. With their joke with the Kraken. Brooks is the old guy that's basically the librarian, more or less, before Andy really tricks out the library.
Mm.
Before he pimps the library's ride.
There you go. Pimp your library.
Brooks, I read this somewhere. I don't know if it's in Stephen King's story or if it's something Darabont came up with or what, but it's never said. But supposedly Brooks' backstory was he was involved. He lost a lot of money gambling or something, and in a fit of rage, he murdered his wife and daughter. And he's been in prison since forever. He's like really old, basically.
Fair enough.
And it's that really, really big scene where they go into the dealings of what it's like to literally spend your entire life in prison and then be released when you're like 90. How you cope with life. That's pretty much impossible.
Very true.
And it ends with the very famous scene of him carving Brooks was here into the ceiling and hanging himself. Like I said, goddamn Robot Chicken. I really wish I... and Family Guy, when Stewie is talking about Lois's vagina. It's like, before I left, I forgot Brooks was here. Tell me, when you were in there, did you see Brooks was here?
Wow.
Anyway, goddamn Seth MacFarlane, you've ruined the Shawshank Redemption on many levels. He hasn't really. Your mind can't help but go there is the problem. But it's a really, really serious, heart-rendering moments that these movies have. The parts in this movie regarding the Brooks character. William Sadler's there. He's basically the guy that doesn't give a fuck about anything. He has a great scene with Brooks involving when Brooks learns that he's going to be released, he realizes that he's not going to be able to live out there, so he actually holds a knife to William Sadler's neck, threatening to kill him, so they'll keep him in prison.
Wow.
So, who else do we have?
We've got Boggs Diamond.
Yes, Mark Ralston.
Yes.
He is the, Red makes it a point to say he's not gay. But when you hear about getting fucked in the ass in prison, that guy is Boggs. He's Delahunt in The Departed, if you need to put a face on him. And that also brings the character into Hadley. Andy basically gets frequently raped by Boggs. They don't really come out and say that, but it's suggested multiple times. Okay. They say sometimes Andy can fight him off, sometimes he can't. I never realized how much of his character in Mystic River kind of stems from Andy Dufresne a little bit.
Wow, that's very true.
But then there's finally the scene where it's when Andy helps Hadley get all that money. Boggs goes into his cell one night and Hadley's waiting for him when the lights go out. And Hadley beats him so badly he never walks again. The last time we see him, he's being taken to the hospital. So, yeah. I think I might have hit all the major characters.
I've got a couple other names, but I mean, they're not, I don't know if they're major characters or not.
I'd say anybody on that list past Gil Bell is probably isn't very important.
Yeah.
Who do you have? Just to be safe.
Floyd, Elmo, Snooze, Ernie.
Yeah, these are just prisoners that are just kind of there. Just like background noise, basically. None of them really get any depth.
Then you are good to go.
But the people we do have a lot of depth, as I just went into.
Very much so.
Alright, with Midnight Express, let's see. We have Max, who is John Hurt. He gets the... John Hurt actually got an Oscar nomination for this. And the real Billy Hayes said that John Hurt bared such a striking resemblance to him and the real guy in the movie, it was creepy.
Nice.
And he's basically, to go with the Green Mile, not just the character in the Green Mile, but the actor in general. John Hurt in this movie reminds me a lot of Michael Jeter. And yeah, you can take that as also Michael Jeter's character in the Green Mile. Mm. Where he's like the, he's got a bit of flamboyance, but they don't really go into that. It's kind of there.
Okay.
And he's basically he's literally the guy they kind of push around, while at the same time he's been there the longest, and he's also the voice of reason most of the time. Like they say, he's been there the longest. He's been there for 7 years. But they say, obviously that's like if you've been, Shawshank takes over like 30 years, so you're thinking like, well, that's nothing. But the prison in Midnight Express, 7 years there is probably about equal to 30 years in Shawshank.
Yeah.
There's Jimmy Booth, who's Randy Quaid, who's basically the loose cannon who's always trying to figure out ways to escape and is always getting the fuck beat out of him. He eventually gets beaten so badly he suffers from a hernia and loses a ball.
Wow.
A ball. And they actually, when he tries to escape towards the end, they beat him again so hard, something bad happens with his hernia. We don't see him anymore after that. There's also the character, Eric, I think his name was.
Correct.
Billy Hayes confessed and said that apparently the guy that Eric is based on, he had a long-running affair with in prison. In the movie, he makes a move on Billy in the shower, and Billy basically rejects him. They kiss, but then that's it. After that, we don't really hear much from him. He's just kind of there. Probably the best supporting character in this movie is Billy's dad. Because of that one scene. It's just one really powerful scene, the one I was talking about earlier, the get me out of here scene.
Mm-hmm.
There's just something about that scene and that character that really brings a heart to the beginning of the movie. When you start to wonder if... Obviously, Billy's guilty, and we don't know how likable he is. We have to question that first, I guess. But Billy's dad comes in and visits him early in his sentence, in his time, and really brings the heart to Billy that we need to see out of him to have sympathy for him.
Mm-hmm.
And this character just does everything he needs to do in one scene. So, yeah, there's the girlfriend character, but she only has 2 scenes, and there's the very famous scene, especially famous because of the cable guy, where she undoes her top and presses herself against the glass, and he pleasures himself, we'll say. That's a brutally awkward scene. I think it's clear they're not one-dimensional characters in Midnight Express. They're just not near as fleshed out as the character. Of course, you know, Shawshank's 20 minutes longer.
True.
So it has more time to do this, but regardless, even only being 20 minutes longer, they bring a lot to the supporting characters in Shawshank. We don't really... The only thing we know about Randy Quaid, really, is what he did to get in. He stole candlesticks from a mosque. So yeah, that's not to demean the characters in Midnight Express at all. It's just this point would definitely go to Shawshank. Next, this was one suggested by you. The best escape scene.
Yes.
Yeah, spoiler alert, both these movies end in an escape. It happens.
Yes.
See, this video is going longer than I thought it would. Okay, the escape scene in Shawshank's obviously legendary. It's right here on the cover.
Yeah.
The rain and shit. It's been referenced in a lot of movies and stuff like that. We have him, the famous scene that was most recently spoofed in Moonrise Kingdom, where you have the poster, and they take the poster down and there's the hole in the wall. And then, he literally went through shit to get out. He went through he waited for lightning and thunder during a storm, and then he would use a rock to... Fucking Seth MacFarlane used the fucking Friends theme. But, he goes into this sewage pipe and walks through shit for, I believe what Red said was the length of 5 football fields.
Oh, boy.
And finally came out at the end. And then the rain scene happens. And we learned the whole time it was the little pickaxe he was using to make chess pieces out of rocks. Because he goes to Red towards the beginning and says, I need you to get something for me because I hear that's what you do. And he says, I just need, you know, this little hammer. And he said, you do realize you would never be able to escape with something like that. And he said, oh, trust me, I don't plan on it. Of course, the thing's like this big. And he says, yeah, it would take 1,000,000 years for somebody to escape with that. Well, it turns out the entire 20 years we see of Shawshank, he's been picking at the wall with this little thing, and he's made this tunnel over the past 20 years.
Nice.
And yeah, it's an iconic scene. Midnight Express is a little different, and it might sound like I'm putting a lot of favor in Shawshank, but hear me out with Midnight Express. It's very interesting. The simplicity of it. It's basically, remember when I said he kills the warden?
Mm-hmm.
This is the extent of the escape in Midnight Express. The warden's in his uniform. He has Billy. He's thrown him into this room. Billy pushes him accidentally. He falls and impales his head on the coat hanger and dies. Billy takes off that uniform, puts it on himself, and walks out the door. He has to get by one guy, and the one guy just kind of shrugs it off. And Billy just walks out the door and runs off, and the movie ends. It was that out of all the 5 years that he spent in there and everything he went through, it turned out being that simple.
Wow.
And you have to kind of admire that they're just able to, all of this, and that's all it took. It kind of reminds me of, this goes back to the beginning too. I can't help but think Ben Affleck might have taken a lot of inspiration from this with the airport scene in Argo.
Mm-hmm.
The simplicity of just getting from one place to another, but the intensity of going through what you gotta do. Granted, this airport scene in Argo is like 15 minutes long. The escape scene in Midnight Express is like 2 minutes. Because it was just so fucking simple. And it's really triumphant too. I mean, it seems so simple, but they do it in a great way. Because he starts to run off, and then the text comes up, and it says, you know, on this date, on this year, Billy managed to cross the border. And they turned the simplest thing into this big triumphant moment, which is very impressive.
True.
So, I would actually say that I would give this to Midnight Express. I know the escape scene in Shawshank is iconic. I completely get that. But Shawshank did a lot with a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Midnight Express equaled it with a little.
That's true.
So, that's impressive.
Very much so.
The next one would fall into the writing. These next two are basically going to mesh together. It's the writing and the directing, but we'll start with the writing. It's pretty simple. But here's the thing. Midnight Express actually won Adapted Screenplay. Oliver Stone wrote it and won his first Oscar for it. Mm. As Jim Carrey told us on the Cable Guy.
Yes.
Having said, okay, it's gonna sound bad, but I don't mean it maliciously. When you think about Shawshank and like Red's narration and just the poetic way the dialogue comes out of Shawshank, there's not really too much that feels completely special about the way Midnight Express is written. There are scenes that are big, like the scene, Billy's speech in court. That's a big thing, and that's a big, writing piece. And I guess, you can take... A lot of people hate it, but actually I think it's kind of ballsy when movies are based on true stories, but have the balls to exaggerate them and go to their own places.
Very true.
So, I'm going to take a wild guess and say Billy didn't actually bite out Rifki's tongue.
Probably.
I can't prove that. I have no idea, but I'm sure the book that he wrote, that the movie's actually supposed to be based on, goes into detail about what's wrong and what's right.
There is actually a listing on Wikipedia about the differences between the book and the film. But yeah, what I was talking about with everything I was talking about with the characters in Shawshank has to do with the writing. And on top of just like I said, even though it's a short, I think it's just a short story that Shawshank's based on. He never did bite out his tongue.
That's what I thought.
Exactly says that word for word right here.
Just a little anecdote.
Mm-hmm.
Oliver Stone wrote Midnight Express and won the Oscar for it. In Natural Born Killers, which Oliver Stone directed, when Mickey's flipping through channels in the hotel, one of the scenes he passes by is the biting of the tongue scene.
Oh, nice.
But there's something, even though Shawshank is based on, I think it's just a short story or a novella.
Yep, Rita Hayworth in The Shawshank Redemption.
Yeah. That's funny, by the way. I keep reading that they had to change the title to just The Shawshank Redemption because they kept getting calls from agents with that new models that would audition for Rita Hayworth. When we only see Rita Hayworth in on the screen and on the poster.
It's actually a novella from a collection called Different Seasons that was released in 1982. The subtitle was Hope Springs Eternal.
Yeah, I think Stand By Me was in that group.
Yes.
The Body, actually.
And the play, The Shawshank Redemption, did go to Broadway in 2009.
So regardless, despite being based on just a novella, the way Darabont wrote the screenplay feels like it came from this Catcher in the Rye-esque novel. Not in story, but I mean in like classic storytelling.
Yes.
In novels.
In scope.
Yes. I could have used any novel there. I just picked the first classic novel that came to my head.
Fair enough.
And yeah, so... And Shawshank feels like that the whole time. All 2 hours and 22 minutes. I said, Midnight Express has these points of brilliance. I mean, sure, there's structure and, you know, other stuff, but just the way things unfold. Like, this is going to go into the directing, too. Actually, we'll just go to directing right now. That point goes to Shawshank. And I'll talk about this going into directing. Also, before we go on, while we're in writing, there were 2 references to Stephen King, by the way. There was, there was one. No, there was one reference to Stephen King. And as far as the writing goes, they say, Red is in cell 237. Mm. Like, room 237 from The Shining. And there's a couple of foreshadowing bits that are really good with the writing, like, or one specifically. You remember how I said Andy escapes?
Yeah.
If you listen carefully earlier in the movie, Red tells Andy to stop living shitty pipe dreams.
Nice.
And there's this funny line that they kept in. Apparently, it was in the story. Red obviously is a white Irish guy. His name is Red. But Darabont just thought it would be a hilarious joke, and it's actually one of the the funnier, more popular lines of the movie. It's when he asks Morgan Freeman why his name is Red, and Morgan Freeman says, maybe because I'm Irish. If you know the character, the way he was written normally, you wouldn't even have to ask why his name was Red.
That's really funny that he was Red in Shawshank, and he just came off doing Red, the movie.
Yeah. Okay. The thing I want to bring up with directing, which is our next category, I don't know if you would have done the annotation by now or not.
Probably.
The way this movie passes through time. This is just a Shawshank love fest. I feel bad for Midnight Express. I really love Midnight Express. I do.
The funny thing is that when he dropped this idea, it was gonna be like everybody's gonna be mad because I'm gonna pick Midnight Express because I like it more. And like now on rewatch, it may not be as.
Shawshank is one of those movies where everybody always talks about how in love they are with it. Like if you were to go around and ask people what their favorite movie is, there's a good chance a lot of people you ask are gonna say Shawshank.
True. That's why it's so heavy on the IMDb Top 250.
Yes, that's one.
Yeah, it's been number one, like,
for
clearly.
a few years now.
Yeah.
And there's actually a reason for that. Shawshank is one of those movies where I really loved it when I saw it, but then I just kind of didn't watch it again for a while, and I just thought of it as a fond memory. And then I watched it again, and I forgot just how great... I don't know how this happened, but I forgot just how actually great it is.
True.
So, starting with directing, the way this movie passes... Obviously, Midnight Express, we pass through time with... It's 1972, it's 1973, it's 1974. The words come up.
Yeah.
In text. Shawshank does not do that. Shawshank uses, like, visual clues. Like, he said, you can tell, too. Darabont said he watched Goodfellas a lot.
Okay.
To decide how to do certain scenes to make it look like it's passing through time. Without saying it's passing through time. Like, when we first meet Brooks, he's got a little bird in his pocket. Named Jake, I think. Yes. And it's just small enough for him to keep it in his pocket, and he, like, feeds it, maggots and stuff. And then the movie just kind of strolls along, and then suddenly we see Andy walking into a room, and there's this giant black bird just sitting there, and Andy turns and says, "Oh, hi, Jake." It's like, wow.
When did that happen?
Then there's, oh shit. I'm gonna draw a blank now. Oh yes, Red's parole hearings. Like, the first time we see Red in a parole hearing, they say, so you've served 10 years of your sentence so far. Are you ready to go out into society? And of course, you know, he pleads his case, and he gets rejected. And then the movie goes along, and then we reach a sudden point in the movie, and Red comes back in. You've served 20 years in your sentence. Are you ready for society? And he gets rejected again, and then more time passes along. He goes back in for a parole hearing. You've served 30 years of your sentence.
Nice.
And they just use those little things to show you how much time is moving. Nobody really, if they aged physically, it's really subtle. Which they might have. Another thing that goes in with the direction is the ending. Darabont was very much into not having the meeting on the beach. He wanted to end it with Red on the bus on his way to see Andy. Mm-hmm. So we didn't have too much sentimentality with them in tears and them running and hugging and, oh my God, I missed you, man, and man, it's so great you're out and all that. But Warner Brothers wanted that because they thought audiences would prefer that.
Yeah. So
what Darabont did was they have the running and hugging and greeting each other and being really happy, but it's shot from this really, really far away distance, and that's the ending shot. The credits actually roll over it.
Wow.
So, a decent compromise there.
Very much.
Like I said, Darabont was actually snubbed of a Best Director nomination, something Alan Parker received for Midnight Express. Which just to say, Midnight Express is very well handled. And I will say this. I'm going to give Alan Parker a lot of credit. First off, there is, the opening is really tense. Like I said, I believe everybody talks about how great the airport scene in Argo is.
Yes.
And I say, once again, I guarantee Affleck took a lot of inspiration from the airport scene in Midnight Express, as well as the escape scene later, but that was a little different. This is an actual airport scene. And just the way it builds tension, there's barely like any score. It won the Oscar for score, but it doesn't really have like an overbearing, dooming score. It just plays out, and it just is intense like that. And it manages to keep... The problem with Shawshank is it goes back and forth. Like, 1 minute we're happy... I mean, I know this is the way prison life probably is, but 1 minute we're happy and we're all best buddies. The next minute, somebody's getting beaten to death.
Yeah.
The next minute, we're happy again. Next minute, somebody's getting screwed over or thrown in solitary. Midnight Express manages to keep this constant tone with it. Like, it has happy moments, but it always has the same underlying tone. And doesn't feel in different places.
Okay.
Some might find the dark tone a little overbearing, but that's just the kind of movie it is. That's the way the prison is. There's no way they're going to score beers from Captain Hadley in somewhere like the Midnight Express prison. And lastly, the thing that I give him the most credit for, the tongue scene, when Billy bites out Rifki's tongue. The whole crew was really, really upset filming this scene, and they couldn't take it. Literally the entire crew, I read this, supposedly, the entire crew got up and left. And Alan Parker, by himself, shot the whole tongue scene with just him and the two actors.
Wow.
Which shows a level of devotion that I believe most directors would call it a day, and they'd figure out something. But Alan Parker was gonna get that scene in, literally making the movie by himself with just the other two actors. And apparently they were on like this constant schedule. Like it was the movie, the experience of making the movie was grueling enough as it is, but it was like 53 days, doing 6 days a week. And it was just constantly in this place. So just for the balls that it took to make this movie, I would give the point to Alan Parker. But I believe that makes Shawshank win 3-2 if I was counting right. Oh, shit. Okay.
Run the list again.
Andy and Billy tied.
Yes, that's 0-0.
Warden Norton got the point.
Yep.
Shawshank supporting characters got the point. Midnight Express got the escape scene. Shawshank got writing. Midnight Express got director.
3-2.
So, yes, this video is 50 minutes long. I did not expect it to be that long.
Yep.
It'll
be a late night, it looks like.
It's only 8:45. So, yeah. So, I never thought Shawshank was overrated by any means.
No.
But I had forgotten, the last time I saw Shawshank before recently was, I don't even know. It's been a while. The whole thing from beginning to end.
Okay.
And I had an appreciation for it when I was younger. But it just manages to... There's a reason this movie's going to stand the test of time. I said Midnight Express is also standing the test of time, it's just not as many people seem to know about it.
Mm-hmm.
Or have seen it. They might have heard about it, but they haven't actually seen it. Or at least the whole thing.
Yeah.
But they know of it.
True.
But, that's pretty much it.
Next week?
I have no idea. I'll figure it out.
Got a couple ideas in mind. I'll run them by you once we get off film. So, have any other words to say before we end this video?
No. Yes. I guarantee, in case you haven't noticed, Shawshank is basically the start of something. People will probably tell you it's like Bruce Almighty started because they cast him as God.
Mm-hmm.
But Shawshank was basically the beginning of everybody wanting to do an impression of Morgan Freeman.
Really?
Get somebody to do an impression of Morgan Freeman and tell them they're not allowed to say the words Andy Dufresne. That'll be hard for them.
I've actually heard people do that before now, and I think about it.
So yeah, like I said, Midnight Express it won 2 Oscars and was nominated for Picture and Director. Shawshank was nominated for 7. A lot of people say it should be it or Pulp Fiction should be Forrest Gump. Like,
Yeah.
Some people say, fuck Forrest Gump and Pulp Fiction. They'll be Shawshank all day long.
We obviously know where you stand.
Yeah, that was just... Any of the 3 would have been fine.
Yeah.
Obviously, I'm biased towards my favorite movie of all time, but I mean, I don't begrudge Forrest Gump for winning, and I wouldn't have begrudged Shawshank for winning.
Nope.
So 94 was a win-win-win year.
True.
Quiz Show and 4 Weddings and Funeral didn't stand a chance, but...
Quiz Show is a really good movie, though.
So, yeah, I'd say we're done here now, so...
All right.
Until next week.